Were you able to text Jim?
I was. I have not heard back from him yet.
Okay.
Let me
Well, why
check
don't we go
in.
ahead and...
Yeah, give me just a sec,
Yep.
Shane. I did, excuse me, Mayor Furman. I did just start the live stream. Let me make sure that's running. It is. Okay, sounds like Jim is going to pop in momentarily. I'm going to go ahead and start if that's good with you.
Yes, thank you.
We are recording.
Wonderful. Well, welcome anyone that's watching, and trustees and staff, thank you very much for attending an extra meeting. We have quite a bit to figure out this evening, but just as a reminder, no decisions are going to be made during the work session. We will vote on whatever conclusions we're able to come up with tonight at our meeting on the 27th. So with that, I'd like to begin this work session at 5:02 on April 20th. So the first item on today's agenda is to discuss committees, boards, and commissions. I think it's first going to be helpful to talk about each of the committees and maybe get some input from John about scope of committees and staff members involved, and then we can discuss those appointments. Following that, we can talk about the different boards and commissions. And there's a handful of restructuring suggestions that I have as well that I'd like for us to discuss. But to begin with, we can just go in the, does everyone have the Excel spreadsheet that Kelly sent around earlier this? Hey, Jim. If everyone has that and can pull it up, the building and grounds, I was wondering if John is able to speak generally about what the scope of that has been over the last couple of months.
Yeah, if I could, Mayor, you know, we haven't met regularly on any of these standing committees, so we're kind of starting at, you know, ground zero. Buildings and grounds, the main, I would say, thrust of that committee is probably Columbine Park. And we had applied for a GOCO grant last year, didn't get it or weren't awarded it, but we'd like to improve Columbine Park, get the rest of the Old Town Hall cleared off, get the public utilities, you know, cleaned up, et cetera, et cetera. So that one is kind of active, but given the COVID, maybe not so active, but that is the main thrust of that committee for right now.
Okay, and then it seems like it overlaps a little bit with the Parks, Rec, and Events Committee. The list that I have has Austin having previously been on the Building and Grounds. I'm sorry, Trustee Lashley and Trustee Barella on the Parks, Rec, and Events Committee. Did those two committees, to your knowledge, work together on the grant for the park, or how have those committees kind of split things up in the past?
It wasn't so much the committee as it was staff, but staff definitely worked pretty hard on getting the GOCO grant together. And beyond that, we haven't had a whole lot of get-together meetings, shall we say.
Okay, Trustee Barella? Looks like you're muted. Trustee Barella, it looks like you're muted. We'll just have to start over in 1 second.
That's right. I'm trying to keep all these toggled screens together here. So we met pretty, I don't know, fairly regularly. I would say at least twice a year, which is actually pretty good, which is more than I can say for a couple of my other ones, for Parks, Recs, and Events. But that name is a bit deceiving because all we ever did during the meetings was discuss what our event fees and our facility fees should be. So I don't know if the name needs to be changed and parks needs to be moved up into building and grounds, if that's what they're trying to cover. And then we make this more outdoor recreation and events for the name of the other committee. Just a thought, because if we were working on anything with parks, we never did it. So just the fee schedule.
Got it. I'm just going to pull up our town code very quickly and see if these are specifically delineated.
Well,
Molly, that's a good point. Trustee Barilla, that's a good point. Oops, let me turn something off here. Because we should have a discussion of where special event fees in general, all that fall under, because that's an area that needs a lot of work. And I'm not sure it falls under building and grounds. Probably doesn't. Probably should fall under parks, recs, and events.
Well, and I'm not sure parks should fall under that. I think if you're talking about the park itself, that's under grounds. If we're talking about, if we call it outdoor recreation, obviously this would take a different session other than this one to change the names, but just to make sure that we actually understand, because when I was put on the Parks, Recs, and Events Committee, I actually thought we would be doing more of what you were just talking about, Mr. Ryder, versus what we really did, which was scheduling and fees.
Yep.
Yep. It seems like I like Trustee Brilla's suggestion to divide or resort those two committees, one to deal with the physical infrastructure and the other to do with events and issues like fees associated with events.
And
I'd love to hear, yes, and outdoor recreation. Trustee Lashley.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, I don't think we ever met for the Building and Grounds Committee once. The Public Utilities Committee that Trustee Uyghur and I are a part of have met a few times with Lisa Dare and John Seitz and some other Bill McDougall, just about specific utilities easements, but that's kind of the extent that we've really utilized that committee, is just discussing kind of interesting areas that don't fit within the normal realm, usually before going to something like the Planning Commission or to the Board of Adjustment too. As far as the building and grounds, yeah, I don't see any reason why some of the Parks and Rec things couldn't be combined with the building and grounds.
Trustee Harper, Birma, or Barney, or Uyghur, any thoughts on these topics?
Not yet, just catching up.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't have any, hard thoughts one way or the other. It does make sense to me to have parks kind of going with building and grounds crew, but I'm just still learning everything too.
Sounds good. So I think that we can, process-wise, I suppose if we do want to change this, we would need to adopt an ordinance to adjust the code, which we can do on the 27th, or I guess, do we need to do a first reading and a second reading for any type of ordinance adjustments, even if they're fairly administrative?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So it'd be a couple of meetings before this is finalized, but I do like the idea of the building, grounds, and parks being the first committee, and then recreation, events, and we can talk about the scope of what the outdoor rec generally would be, in addition to whatever recreation and events includes. With that in mind, there's still two committees. One's more physical oriented and others more events oriented. So I imagine both would potentially deal with grants, both would interact with third parties looking to host events at the town or use our building and grounds. And in terms of assigning roles among us, there's a couple of things that having follow-up discussions with everyone about the interim appointments which were really just intended to be interim appointments. I have some feedback and some suggested changes, but if we use that chart as a baseline, does anyone have an issue with the physical infrastructure committee that's currently called Building and Grounds being Trustee Lashley, Trustee Bierma, and Trustee Harper, and the current Parks, Rec, and Events committee that we're talking about shifting to recreation events and outdoor recreation, if that's different than recreation generally, being Mayor Pro Tem Barney, Trustee Bierma, and Trustee Uyghur. Trustee Uyghur, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For me personally, I would prefer to be involved more on the physical side of things. So working more with the buildings and the grounds and the parks, as opposed to being more with the events sort of things, personally.
Oh, I can trade with Trustee Uyghur if that makes it easy.
Any concerns or issues so far?
Mr. Mayor, would it be helpful if staff actually takes these committees and breaks them down and into what exactly they're supposed to do? You know, we have buildings and grounds, we have public safety, we have public utilities, all this. I'm not sure we've got a good breakdown of the scope of what each of these committees are actually supposed to do. Would that be helpful? If staff broke it down and said, you know, buildings and grounds, these are the things you need to be attending to, public safety, et cetera, et cetera. Just throwing it out there.
Trustee Brella?
I would say yes, because when I first got on the board, none of this was made very clear. You can read the town code and it's just very basic. We asked John Seitz to give us a quick overview on what he did and how he ran his committees. And then we were told that it was only the staff members that called the meetings. And I really don't think that's correct, but we weren't given a lot of really good information at the time, because I believe that any member of the committee can call for a meeting at any time with staff. So I think having a better layout of how everything should work, who calls what, does it need 2 members to call it? Like we need to get something on the agenda, it takes 2 members of the committee to do it. I think that's actually really smart. And then we should just volunteer. Personally, this is what appointing each other to me means. Obviously, everybody can have a different view and opinion, but when somebody says, who wants to be on the public safety committee, and you've got 3 people that raise their hands, then you pick 3 people. Or if you've got 4 people, does one want to back out? I mean, these are just thoughts, because when you appoint each other, that's really what we should be doing. It's not saying, here's a list, I'm going to tell you, you, and you. It should be like, who would like to be on the grounds, buildings, and parks committee, based on the descriptions that we get back from staff telling us what our actual jobs would be on each of these committees.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, we actually on this board have a lot of horsepower in various ways, and to apply that horsepower is really going to be important going forward. So we've got a unique situation here in that our board now really could bring a lot of experience in their own way. We just need to make sure we focus it on those ways, if that makes sense.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I feel like maybe we didn't get the greatest introduction to some of these committees, but I think we were also kind of told that, you know, these are the committees that meet regularly and here's kind of what we discuss. And then we were really told that some of these committees just hardly meet at all, like building and grounds. We never met once. I'm not really sure what public safety does, but if so some of the members of the board could talk about public safety. We could do that. Public utilities, like I covered. I think a lot of these are we could probably define and talk about the roles here, but I think it might take a little bit more discussion between the board to figure out some of the roles of like public safety.
Before Trustee Barella, I just want to quickly interject that the town code does have one sentence descriptions of what these are that provide a general idea of scope. For example, the Public Safety Committee is described as having general supervision over all matters appertaining to the fire and police regulations of the town. How that ends up being enacted and the interaction between the committee and our fire and safety fire and police regulations is unclear, I think, and that's where we could probably use some staff input. But I think the general scope is relatively clear, and I hope that we can, as a board, adopt some initiatives to make sure that these committees are a bit more active. And there's a lot of overlap among the committees as well, and it'd be nice to see the different initiatives, like we were just talking about this parks grant being worked on perhaps by both committees. Yes, Trustee Barella.
Okay, so I was on the Public Safety Committee and we met 2 different times, one of which was to talk about the signage that was required around the post office saying 15 minutes only. Came up with a plan, but there was no money to go forward. Then the other time we met, we set up the area for which OHV trailer parking would be down by Silver Summit and that whole section. And that's it. That's all we ever did. So it actually never pertained to truly police and or fire. So there's a lot that can be said, because I've read all of those one-line descriptions and they're so vague. What does it really mean? Because that's not what we did. So just saying.
So so rather than looking at the interim appointments spreadsheet, where I attempted to get input from everyone and sort things, and following the other process where we would have a brief conversation about what the committee does, and then people raise hands in terms of interest. How do we decide what to do if all of us raise our hands? What's any suggestions there? Trustee Barney?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know about the answer to that question, but I wonder if our process could just start with, instead of going description of committee, raise your hands, if we could just go through all of them, because we may have a comparative preference once we learn more about a different one. And I would imagine that, I think John's, that Mr. Ryder is right, that it would be useful and beneficial to go through and really examine them. But for the purpose of the work session, it seems like we could, with the knowledge of the people who are already here and the previous trustees, we could put together enough of a picture of what those committees currently do or don't do, run through the list, and then work out which ones we want to participate on.
I think that sounds like a great suggestion. Any objections? Trustee Barella?
Just one more suggestion. You said, what if everybody puts in for it? Then we all have Callie draw a bunch of pieces of papers with their name on it, and John picks one out of the hat. I mean, that's total lottery. It's totally fair that way if everybody wants to be on something.
So despite fairness, I agree that at least is randomized. I'm not sure that that's the best way to assign committees where all of us might be interested. There may be, for example, multiple of us are Main Street businesses in town, and sometimes the committees would benefit from maybe only one Main Street business being represented, someone else who has a different, maybe associated with the school. And so before we go down that path, I just want to point out that may not align us with the best possible committee with the skill set, interests, and experience that we each have. So I'd be interested in maybe exploring another alternative to that. Yes, Trustee Brella?
Well, but in the interest of actually having everybody learn what they do and to be on these committees, I'm more than happy to switch up any of mine because I've already done them. And so that gives me a better scope of knowledge of the entire working of the town. So approximately every 2 years, it should switch itself up anyway. So it doesn't really matter. You know, I'm sorry, Jess, you were on the planning commission for 4 years. That's a good one to switch out. You've already got the experience, and yes, you've got the knowledge, but you've already been on there for 4 years, so it should be somebody else's turn to get into it. And traditionally, the library board has always been headed by the mayor, not a trustee. So that's another one that needs to kind of fall in. So, but I'm more than willing to switch off of any of mine to learn others, so I have a better scope of understanding.
Thank you, Trustee Brella. I think that I totally agree with as well. I think that's a great point. I'm not sure that necessarily is either for or against the process of drawing straws if we have more than the number of people that are interested. So I'd still like to figure that out before we have a specific issue that may become more heated if there are people really passionate about it. Trustee Lashley, yes.
Thank you. I am totally willing to switch and change around stuff too. I think we kind of need to examine some of these on a case by case like basis as we go through some of these. I know that there were some reasons that historically some of these committees were distributed a certain way too. Like the Planning Commission is one example that I was told that they wanted to have it so that there would be a continuous trustee between elections. So that's why there's 2 board seats on the Planning Commission, is that they wanted 1 board member from one election term and 1 from another. But I think we can, if we can go through these case by case, and maybe if some of these are contentious, we can come back around to them or examine the best way to handle the ones that may be the most contentious, because I have a feeling that a lot of these are just going to be like, yep, that's good, that's good.
Oh, I do too, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I won't make an issue where there isn't one. Trustee Harper, yes.
My only comment about this, it has to be fair, it has to be transparent, and there cannot be folks who's already serving that there may be a conflict of interest in some areas. That would be, for example, having a commission on the railroad and then sticking me in charge of it. That just doesn't work. That's not transparent, and that doesn't serve the rest of the board.
Or the community.
Yeah.
Trustee Lashley?
Just as far as these committee appointments go, I just wanted to ask a little bit of clarification as to how the town code asks that we appoint members to this committee. Is it that we were told during the last election, more or less, that the mayor generally was in charge of these committees? I don't know if that's official or if that's just kind of the way that some of these things were done. And then just, yeah, I mean, it would be great to have you, Jim, if we had a railroad commission, because you have so much experience in doing it. And I think that these committees too aren't judicial. Like, we don't make final decisions. We just make recommendations to the board as well for, well, at least some of these committees. Most of them are advisory. So maybe it wouldn't be inappropriate for Jim Harper to be in charge of the Railroad Commission, because it wasn't actually, we weren't actually voting on it. It was just recommendations, and he has the most experience in that.
So the code specifically says that appointments are made with respect to officers and appointees by the Board of Trustees by open ballot. So really, if we were to follow the code word for word, we would vote on each committee as a group, and whoever had the most votes for each committee would be appointed. And so I guess maybe that's the best way to handle any conflicts, but to save time and energy, perhaps we could go through the descriptions and then see if we have volunteers, and we could do rather than an open ballot by paper, we could do a vocal ballot to make sure there's support for those volunteers. And then in the event that there's more volunteers than seats and we can't resolve that through discussion, we could do those by vocal votes. Does that sound like a good process for everyone?
If it gets contentious, I think we should follow the code and do the written ballot. I think that's generally how we do a lot of stuff in the planning commission. But if we have a consensus among the group for it, I think absolutely it's fine to do vocal participation.
And where that gets tricky is if someone is appointed to too many committees. But let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay. So to go through the code descriptions of the committees, they're all very brief. Sorry, I'm just pulling them back up. So we've already, I'll go over it very quickly again, but we've already said buildings and grounds, which we may revise, has general supervision over all matters pertaining to the building and grounds of the town, including the cemetery, though there is a separate cemetery board. Public safety shall have general supervision over all matters pertaining to fire and police regulations of the town. Public utilities has general supervision over all streets, alleys, sidewalks, and crossings, and to see the same are kept clean, repaired, and properly graded. They shall have general supervision in all matters pertaining to town lighting. It says town lighting plant, and shall have general supervision over all matters pertaining to the water and sewer systems of the town. Speaking with Administrator and John Seitz last week, sounds like that committee will have quite a bit of responsibility in the next years. So we should take that into account as well. The Ordinance and Personnel Committee, which I think we've called the Town Code and Personnel Committee in the past, at least unofficially, has general supervision over all. Well, I'm not sure this is correct, but it says supervision over all buildings in the town and supervise generally the preparation and enforcement of necessary ordinances for the town. That isn't, to my knowledge, how that committee has acted in the recent past. It's had a lot more responsibility relating to the personnel manual and the town code. And so when we were talking about what these committees would do going forward, it sounded like the personnel manual has quite a bit of, it may actually be in decent shape, but the way that that comp for town staff is set up isn't necessarily in line with the personnel manual, or other hiring practices haven't been followed exactly by the personnel manual, and we need to align what's happening with what's in that manual. And then that committee also would presumably oversee the updating of the town code to fix, for example, the inconsistencies we just saw in the language, where the personnel and ordinance manual has general supervision over buildings, even though we have a building and grounds. And then finally is the Parks and Recreation Committee, which we talked about being more of a recreation and events committee, which has general supervision over parks and recreation facilities and open space for the town. So that would need to get overhauled as well. So I guess I would recommend that we volunteer for these appointments based on our understanding of what the committees will do going forward, and we will make proposed adjustments as necessary to the language in the town code. Administrator Ryder, would you like to fill in any of the gaps? Oh, and sorry, finally, and very importantly, is the Finance Committee. For the recent past, that's been the entire board. In speaking with past board members, Administrator Ryder, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, is just my view of what I've taken away from those conversations, and a handful of others. It sounds like by having the entire board on the finance committee, it ends up being mostly Administrator Ryder doing the work and then presenting the budget to the entire board and then having a discussion. It sounds like it may be more beneficial to have a smaller finance committee of 3 members of the trustees with another layer of assistance to Administrator Ryder as budget or other finance matters are being reviewed, analyzed, updated, and then that would get presented to all of the trustees in order to vote on decisions. Trustee Barella, yes.
The previous town code that I decided to read before I was elected to, it actually was broken down into a smaller group, and it actually worked very efficiently that way. All the questions would come in. You'd have 2 or 3 people that were helping write the bills, going over through everything line by line, and all the other previous board members that I know that before they decided to change the town code loved the other method. So.
Administrator Ryder, do you see any issues with us reverting back to there being a smaller finance committee that you would work with, perhaps with some more frequency than the way that it worked in the recent past with the entire trustee board?
No, not at all. Obviously, the situation we're in, we're going to have to entertain some pretty tough decisions. And so working with a smaller group and then presenting to the board for final decision would be preferable.
Great. So I see 2 different routes we could go right now. We could either ask for volunteers for each of these committees and work through that process, or we could continue talking about the substance of the other boards and commissions so that everyone has a better sense of the total scope of commitments they might be making today before they volunteer for these first committees. Though the way that I think it works out is everyone will end up on either 3 or 4 of these committees, and then there'll be 1 or 2 appointments for each of the other boards and commissions, and so it may not be terribly relevant towards this first discussion in terms of commitments for the second portion of the discussion. Thoughts?
I just had one quick question regarding the finance committee. I think one of the other reasons that the finance committee was taking the entire board as well had to do kind of with public transparency as well in that decision. I just would request maybe that we try, or at least for discussion here, do we think it's appropriate that if the finance committee meets, that we make that a publicly noticed meeting so that if more trustees want to attend or if members of the public want to attend, that there's some input given to other folks as well, because I know that has been an issue in the past.
I think I would look first to some input from Trustee Barella or Trustee Wiegert, who have been here before. Trustee Wiegert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what Trustee Lashley has presented is absolutely correct and on the right path. If we're not going to have all members of the board responsible for financial decisions, then it should be a publicly noticed meeting so that, just like you said, Trustee Lashley, if more members of the board wants to show up and become informed about how the finances are progressing, then we need to make that available.
Thank you. Trustee Barella.
We don't actually make decisions in the meetings. We meet, we discuss, and then we bring recommendations to the board. So it would technically be at a noticed meeting. Obviously, anybody who wants to come should always be available. I think all the meetings should be noticed because I think Jess and I attended one and Tiffany was on our group and Judy wanted to come. So we made sure it was noticed. just because you didn't get assigned, because we were being assigned committees. Let's look at it that way though too. So maybe if we are volunteering more or assigning each other, you won't see as much where you get lost, you know what I mean, in the interest. Because Judy really wanted to be on the personnel manual and she wasn't assigned there. So we just made all of our meetings open. So
I think those are great suggestions and context. But I'm all for that. Any other thoughts or any contrary views?
Yeah, for me, I totally agree that these need to be open to the public, and any kind of financial discussion, decision as we navigate it, particularly these waters, needs to be out in the public for sure.
Wonderful. It shall be done. Any other questions about these first 6 committees before we start asking for volunteers? Trustee Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see a better description of each one. I would.
I think, yes, I would like that as well. But I'm not sure we're going to get one that's accurate relative to what we will be doing going forward, since we're talking about shifting the boundaries of what these committees are doing. And from the input we've heard so far from Trustee Lashley and Trustee Varela, they've met with relative infrequency. I think we have an opportunity to create those descriptions of what these committees should be doing with input from town staff. And I'm not sure that postponing appointments and keeping the interim appointments in place for another, I don't know, minimum 1 week, but possibly longer, in order to generate those descriptions is necessarily the best path forward, but I'm open to discussion on that.
I'd like to discuss that.
Okay. How do you suggest creating those descriptions given the context we have?
We have staff already in place. Staff, obviously, they know what they're doing. Obviously, job descriptions will change if that's what we're discussing. But I don't see anything wrong with at least a 1 paragraph to better guide this team going forward. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing.
Other views?
Just likely we'll have to make a town ordinance in order to change those descriptions in the town code. Correct, that'll need a first and second reading, just as if we just changed the scope of what those committees were doing. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah, it's possible, Trustee Lashley. I'd have to look at that.
Trustee Uyghur, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Well, if I'm just understanding Trustee Harper correctly, I think he's saying that it would be worth for the board and taxpayer money to pay somebody on our staff a couple hours so that we can get a better description on what we're seeing here. I just ask that we're respectful of the current situation that we're in with finances and our economy and the situation that we're dealing with, and try to be responsible and respectful to our staff. Allow them to do the job that they need to do.
Trustee Barney.
Trustee Harper, are you wanting those descriptions so that you and all of us can make more informed decisions about how we serve on the committees, or just for general understanding and consumption? Is it for decision-making purposes or defining purposes?
Decision-making purposes, and that's a great question.
You know, Mayor and Board, I think Trustee Harper's, I think that's valid to try to define what these committees scope and purpose are, and it won't take a lot of staff time or cost a lot of money. We'll be sensitive to that. So if it pleases the board, you know, maybe we, as staff, spend just a little bit of time defining exactly what the scope and purpose of these committees are in our mind anyway. It'll help at the end. So I'd suggest you let us do that, and it won't cost a lot of time or money at this point.
To provide a contrarian view for consideration, the trustee board is established to set policy, and the staff is supposed to, you know, to affect the policy, and we're supposed to keep our fingers out of the affecting of the policy outside of these committees, kind of ensuring that protocols followed and scope is good. And so with that in mind, wouldn't it make sense that the boards with input from trustees develop what the scope of the committees are, as opposed to the staff? And I take the point, the staff is much more knowledgeable in all of these categories than we are today. But wouldn't it make sense that we have the general knowledge to create the categories, to then do it top down rather than bottom up? Just as a question to everyone. Trustee Barella?
Everybody is exactly right. Let's just put it that way. Yes, we are the decision makers and we are the policy makers. Once we set the policy in place, then it all goes then to staff to do what we've asked. That's the way, you know, that's the 30,000 view, and they're your boots on the ground. But this is where things get tricky when you're looking at a lot of these. They've got the knowledge. They need to, the staff says, hey, this is what I need help with. The committees that I met, especially with Lisa and Todd, which Lisa would bring an excellent package, and so would Todd, for us to go over. So it was easy to look at it in the event scope, because we had staff that was bringing us what their issue was with the way something was written. And it was needing to go to the board to affect the change. Hopefully that all makes sense. So yes, all of these things are 100% valid, and everybody is saying the right thing. But right now, with a brand new board of 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, we've got a lot of people that don't know. Trustee Burma, I mean, come on, give us some input. You know, I like that Mayor Pro Tem Barney is going for it. Don't be afraid to say what you really think, because you don't know. I didn't know when I got there. Trustee Uyghur didn't know when he got there. Trustee Lashley didn't know when he got there. So it's okay to ask all these questions now. When you're in these work sessions, feel free to speak freely, to really express your mind and express what it says. If you haven't read it, I encourage everybody, but I'm a nerd. I read both town codes, current and old, because I wanted to know. I wanted to know what my role and responsibility was. But I do defer to staff all the time, because they're the ones who carry out what we say. If we make a stupid decision, they're going to come back to us and go, well, that was dumb. So yeah, all these answers are right, but what do we want to do?
So my preference as a member of the committee would be to ask that we go forward with appointments with the general ideas that we have, and that the initial meetings of these committees be to have the staff lead a discussion on how to better describe these committees. That would be my personal preference, but I do want to follow the protocol where we make all of these decisions as a group, and so I'm still interested to hear from everyone else as well. Trustee Barney.
Is there are we under a time constraint in how in appointing members to committees? And if so, what does that look like? And also, nope, I'll save my other thought for in a second. I'm wondering about the time constraint, because I think Trustee Barella brought that up possibly on last week's and Monday.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you. I think that maybe it's not the end of the world as far as time constraint. I think that last time we did this, it was like 1 to 2 weeks before we actually made appointments. And I think that we did better kind of overall because we do have people appointed to these committees. So we do definitely have the time where we could sit back and try and reevaluate and restructure these committees, and then in one kind of foul swoop, change everything in ordinance and make new appointments to these committees. I think we definitely have the time to do that. I guess if we're going to go that route, we probably need to all make sure that the appointments that we have in place are going to be okay. Because that I think is easier to change in things like ordinances.
So for example, there's a planning commission meeting tomorrow night, which wouldn't be affected by whatever our discussion is today anyway, because we wouldn't be able to set anything until Monday. Yes, Trustee Barella?
Well, if that's the case, then it should go back to being Jess and Austin until we make the next appointments. And then because the two of them are there, but obviously Austin is the holdover for the 2-year, and then we'd have to see who wanted to be the next person on that, because Jess's term should be up after 4 years. So, and I believe the law states it, I think it's a Colorado revised statute that actually says for a statutory town, we have 30 days from the setting of the new board to actually go through and make the appointments. That includes the ones that we did on Monday night. Those are usually pretty easy, but we still have time. So we have plenty of time to discuss it. I do believe we were going to have a library board meeting, but I think Jackie's just said until COVID's over, library's closed. So I don't have a meeting that I have to go to. And yeah, so I agree with Trustee Lashley. Can't call you Mayor Pro Tem now. I just want to use everybody's first names. I'm sorry, it drives me. I know we have protocol, but
What's the second
I
half
just
of the
forget.
meeting?
Well, I look at everybody and I'm like, oh yeah, wait, yeah, never mind. I have to call you by your trustee name. I'm fine to have, the existing committees go forth. Do we actually see that there's going to be any other meetings? Kelly, can you think of one? Or Lisa, besides the finance committee that we do on the whole board does on the second meeting of every month? Can you guys think of anything really pressing that we would have to meet for right now?
The Kendall meeting's meeting this week.
Correct. That was
I'm pretty
what I was
sure
going to add.
I'm pretty sure that Region 9, San Juan Development, and the Chamber all have meetings coming up pretty soon. I'm not sure if they're in the next 10 days. Trustee Lashley, sorry, I'll come back to you, Trustee Barella.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points. I think that the second group of committees is going to be more pressing for us to make some decisions on than the first ones that we were talking about. I was kind of under the impression that we were still talking about the standing committees, like finance, building and grounds, all those. But yeah, certainly I think it's up for discussion. Definitely for the planning commission, since we voted on the appointments right now, I think it is Shane and I, since we temporarily voted on that. So I don't think we can change that for the planning commission until we get together and vote on that again.
That said, I think Trustee Wiegert is more knowledgeable than I am on there are substantive issues to be discussed and decided on tomorrow, and I would prefer to vote as Trustee Wiegert recommends if, since we're with it. When we did these interim appointments, I was not aware of this planning commission meeting tomorrow night or the substantive nature of the agenda. So I don't know the best way to resolve that, but I agree with what Trustee Lashley said, that we did vote on these appointments and we can't change them in this meeting. Trustee Barella, did you have a follow-up to what Trustee Lashley was saying?
So we're looking at these in two different sections then.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay. So I was talking about all of them together as a collective. Yeah, there are some others. The chamber board meetings, Lisa Branner is already appointed as community relations to the chamber board. She actually gave up her seat as, as bench of snowboards to take the town's permanent position. So that doesn't require another trustee. That's what the town of Silverton gets, period. Okay. I don't know. I know the Southwest COG was typically the mayor, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Library board's typically the mayor. And then Region 9, who was that on Region 9 with you? Was that the mayor? No, that wasn't the mayor, was it?
I think it is the mayor.
It was.
Yeah.
So we are to address what's obviously what's going to come up very soon. We went from a somewhat retired person as mayor that may have more. I have a lot of time to commit to this, but I may not have as much time as former Mayor Tukey had, and I will hopefully get some help from this board and our staff in some of the appointments that have been the mayor in the past, but may not require me to do directly.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, and the board, we are well represented on all of these committees, boards, entities, etc. So for the public's consumption, Silverton, San Juan County is well represented with the best interest in mind, why we navigate the permanent appointments and so forth. I don't want the public or anybody to think somehow we're, letting them down, etc. Or we're well represented, and we will serve the best interests of this community while we navigate permanent appointments.
So we heard Trustee Harper and Trustee Lashley support postponing. It sounded like Trustee Barella was in support of that as well. Trustee Bierma, Trustee Wiegert, Trustee Barney, thoughts on postponing our decision to make appointments until staff has an opportunity to summarize what each of these boards should be doing from their perspective? Trustee Bierma?
I think that sounds just fine to me. I've been following along on the town code as we've been going through this, and I have no problem with that.
With postponing?
Yeah.
Trustee Barney?
I have no problem with that either. I think if I were unilaterally to make this decision, I would probably say I support the idea of working in smaller groups in sort of session 1 with the staff to define that in work sessions and have it be an organic outcome of that, and then potentially report back to the board. But also I'm totally comfortable learning from the staff and postponing.
Trustee Barella, and then Lashley.
Okay, I was gonna say Austin had his hand up first, but
It was close.
okay. So I guess I've got my little sheet up here. Cemetery board. When
So-
were they? Did they
To
ever
interrupt-
meet?
So to interrupt, let's go back
Kind of
to
figured.
the idea of deciding on the committees, what we plan to do with those first, and then let's speak about the boards and commissions separately, because those we may be able to manage to appoint this evening.
Okay, then,
Those are a little bit different than the town committees.
all right, then I'll defer to Trustee Lashley.
Thank you. Trustee Lashley.
Thanks. I wasn't necessarily in support of putting all of it off. I think we should definitely make sure, at least today, if we have any discrepancies with the way that the committees would be arranged, that we at least explore that. I'm totally comfortable waiting. I'm comfortable making a decision today. Although I do feel like for the new trustees, if I were in your position, I'd probably want a little bit more time to discuss and decide. But I think that these don't necessarily have to be written in stone, and we we can discuss changing them whenever we need to, as long as we get around to discussing and changing all of this. And I understand the desire to kind of get some of these committees firmed up and at least be able to know with confidence who we're sending to these meetings and not have too many transitions.
Trustee Uyghur, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I would only just comment that we've got a lot of stuff on our plate as town board trustees, and I'd like to see us work towards being very efficient in our meetings and respectful of each other's time. We all know that this basically comes out to a volunteer position, and we should be respectful of each other's time.
Trustee Barney.
I guess that was part of my other thinking on moving forward tonight, was to just not continue to move at a pace where we can tackle the issues that are kind of coming down the barrel at us. And if it's prudent to be slow right now because it's going to get us further in the long run, I don't have the experience to know that. I'm happy to slow down now to go fast later. But also, I don't want to just be lambasted by issues if I don't know, just trying to think about how we allocate our time.
Looking at the committee specifically, the two that I see some time pressure related to, where I think we could be more effective by making a decision sooner than later, would be the Finance Committee, where I would like to see the trustees supporting Administrator Ryder and continuing to tweak the budget and playing with the model that he shared with us, and perhaps meeting with more frequency than the town meetings every other Monday, at least until we have more certainty around what the future looks like. And the other would be the Public Utilities Committee, which I think could be very helpful in supporting John Seitz in his efforts to get those very large grants that he mentioned to us the other day, and just to be able to ask him what support he needs. I suppose we could do that informally anyway, but that might be something helpful. And related to that, I suppose, would be the email that we saw from John Seitz earlier today with the Blair Street scope of work, and whether or not that should be discussed at a committee level to figure out how that might be moving forward, and how that's being financed. But those seem to be the more timely issues. Everything else doesn't seem to be terribly pressing. I'm not sure if that influences anybody or not. How should we decide what to do next? Should we vote on whether to volunteer for appointments this evening or to postpone? Trustee Harper?
I want to agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I think we should have a discussion, a deeper discussion, and table it for another week or two with a better understanding of each one, what they are, the committees, boards, commissions. Nothing is going to go away in 1 week or 2 weeks, but we have a time to make an educated guess on all this.
So to be clear, we're just speaking about the committees at this moment. We're not talking about boards and commissions. And I didn't take Trustee Barney's comment to really go one way or the other. She said, if it is more efficient to go slow, we should go slow, but not to go slow unless that's the case.
I'm agreeing with that statement.
Great. I also don't see a ton of utility from this, because I think we as a group need to determine the scope of these boards, and that's why we need to, as a group, determine whether or not we'll be resorting, for example, what we talked about with the buildings and grounds versus park rec and events committees. And I'm not sure that asking the staff to develop summaries of these and waiting a week or two or more to review those summaries will significantly influence our individual interests in participating in the general scope of each of these committees, which I think we all have a vague idea of what they are and can say whether or not it's something that we strongly are disinterested in or might have interest in. So I suppose a show of hands so that we can at least move on. Making appointments this evening, and not official, but at least volunteering and sorting out this chart to then make appointments on Monday. So doing that now, I would ask for hands.
I just had a
I'm not
question on
doing
that.
it
Are we
tonight.
just talking about
Oh, sorry.
committees, or are we talking about boards and committees as well?
We're only talking about committees. We'll talk about the boards and commissions once this is settled.
Okay,
So
all right, sorry.
let's do that again because that was a question. So
Yeah,
those who
sorry.
would like to proceed with a rough idea of appointments this evening. And those who would like to wait. So I would ask then that we proceed. So should we continue to go with hands for these volunteers? Just keep things simple. Building and grounds. Can I see who has an interest in participating in this committee? Jess and Jordan.
I'm currently on that committee. I would do it, but I'm purposely doing this because if Jess would rather be on the physical side of when we change it, I think that would make it easier, and I'd prefer to be on the Park Recs and Events Committee. That's all right.
Mm-hmm. So where we are deficient in number, I'll make a note and we can come back to fill those gaps. But I have for buildings and grounds, Trustee Bierma and Trustee Wiegert. Public safety. Trustee Wiegert.
I was already on, so I'm going to defer.
Okay. Public utilities.
I was just gonna go back to the public safety.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to being on that.
Okay.
But not my top pick, but I'm not opposed to the mark already being by my name.
So we've got Trustee Wiegert and Trustee Bierma on public safety. Is that correct?
That's what I have as well.
Okay.
Then public utilities. So Trustee Lashley, are you raising your hand for a question or for Trustee Lashley, please go ahead.
I was going to clarify too, on the same lines of Jordan. I'm not opposed to being on any of these committees, on the Public Safety Committee or any others too. But I will raise my hand then next for the Public Utilities Committee.
Okay. So Trustee Lashley, Trustee Barella, Trustee Wiegert, and Trustee Harper. Lashley. Barella, Harper, Wiegert. And I had my hand up as well on that one. All right, so that's one we'll have to come back to as well, because that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ordinance and personnel. That's easy. So we have Trustee Mayor Pro Tem Barney, Trustee Harper, and Mayor Furman.
Oh, not mine. Did nobody see me? I was trying
didn't
to
see you.
up something too.
So you're raising your hand for that one as well?
For codes and personnel, yeah, we only
Yep.
ever met once and it was disastrous. So that was, I'd love to actually see something go forward with that one.
This one I think
put
will-
my hand down.
I'm sorry, I was clicking off my screen, my other screen, because I had the little thing up. So I didn't actually see who everybody raised hands, sorry.
Trustee Barella, which one? You're saying that personnel was a disaster?
Oh my God, yeah. Jess was there.
All right. I'm putting you down.
Parks, Rec, and Events, which we hope to change to be more event and recreation oriented. Trustee Barney, Trustee Lashley, Trustee Bierma, and Trustee Harper. And sorry, it's Mayor Pro Tem Barney. And Finance. Oh, Trustee Barney, do you have a question? You're muted.
A comment.
Mhm.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that not opposed to being put on, also not opposed to being taken off.
For which one?
Any, I feel pretty flexible about the ones I've raised my hand for.
So Finance. So Trustee Barella and Mayor Furman.
And Jim and, sorry, Trustee Harper and Trustee
Lashley.
also
great.
raised their hands.
Sorry, I'm toggling between screens as well. Thank you. Harper, Lashley. All right, so we've got one committee with the appropriate number of people, which is the Parks, Rec, and Events. Otherwise, we are too short on building and grounds and public safety, 2 over on public utilities, and 1 over on ordinance and personnel, as well as finance. So, Trustee Mayor Pro Tem Barney, yes?
I could switch from ordinance and personnel to buildings and grounds, if that helps.
Okay. So buildings and grounds is good. Ordinance and personnel is now also good. And our discrepancies are, we need 2 more for public safety, 2 less on public utilities, and 1 less on finance. Trustee Lashley.
If it makes things easy, you can change me from public utilities to public safety and remove me from the finance committee if you had me on that.
Okay. So now we just have four.
Okay, I'm just going to speak since I'm not being called on. Trustee Lashley, I really think public utilities should be you. After that meeting that we had with sites and we did the tour of the water plant and the sewer plant, you're very knowledgeable, you're very impassioned. That's why I was actually thinking it was going to be you and I going forward. I'd hate to see you off of that just because of your knowledge that you do have or that you were presenting that day. This is something new with the whole sewer plant restructuring and everything that we have to do. We have an enormous task ahead of us with this. We're looking at 7 to 10 million within the next 10 years, 7 to 10 years. So I don't know, I feel that you would serve really well on that Public Utilities Committee. I don't want to see you back off of that one.
Okay, I appreciate that, Trustee Barella. Yeah, that's fine by me. I'm okay with all of this stuff. Yeah, I agree. I agree that yeah, our tour of the sewer plant was pretty telling, and we're going to have a lot of work coming forward with that committee.
Agreed.
So who were our nominees on that committee then?
So now on public utilities, our nominees are Trustee Lashley, Trustee Barella, Trustee Harper, and Trustee Wiegert. Trustee Harper right now is the only trustee that has 4 nominations, being public utilities, ordinance and personnel, parks, rec, and finance. Everyone else has 3, except myself and Mayor Pro Tem Barney only have 2. And right now we just have 1 too many volunteers for public utilities and parks, rec, and events.
If it helps, you can remove me from the finance committee.
That does not help.
Oh, no, not that one.
Take it to 3.
Either the 2 that we have. So if you would, Trustee Harper, volunteer to remove yourself from either parks, rec, and events or public utilities, that would be helpful.
I like them both.
Okay, you know what?
I'll step back. I will step back from parks, rec, and events. How's that?
Okay. And then we need Trustee Barella or Trustee Wiegert to step back from public utilities.
I'll step back from public utilities. So you've got this, Trustee Lashley. You and I were on the exact same page going
I got it.
with what we need for the sewer plant. So
You'll get good updates with what we do too, for sure.
hey, I am totally trusting you.
You guys should Zoom high five it.
Okay.
John, if that got too confusing, I've got the spreadsheet with all that I'll share with you. So moving right along, what does it, do you want me to read what we ended up with? Okay. Building and grounds, Mayor Pro Tem Barney, Trustee Bierma, and Trustee Wiegert. Public safety, Trustee Lashley, Trustee Bierma, and Trustee Wiegert. Public utilities, Trustee Lashley, Trustee Harper, and Trustee Wiegert. Ordinance and personnel, Mayor Furman, Trustee Barella, Trustee Harper. Parks, rec, and events is Mayor Pro Tem Barney, Trustee Lashley, and Trustee Bierma. And finance is Mayor Furman, Trustee Barella, Trustee Harper. And
Hey.
Trustee Harper, if anything really doesn't work out once we do determine what the board these commission or committee descriptions are, we can definitely revisit a reappointment if necessary. Trustee Barella.
Just read ordinance and personnel again.
I have Mayor Furman, Trustee Barella, Trustee Harper. Trustee Lashley. Yes.
I'm just one concern on there. The finance committee and the ordinance and personnel committee, that is kind of a full plate for the 3 of you to do both of those. If either one of you 3 would like to switch for any of those, I wouldn't blame you, and I'd volunteer to switch if you needed to.
I would be open to switching from either to parks, rec, and events, though I think you'd be best with finance. I'd like to be involved with redrafting of the code to the extent my legal background could be helpful. Trustee Barney.
Jim, I think I might have heard you right, but I would be open. I could also trade you Parks and Rec for ordinance. Or I'm happy to.
Was there anything else? Oh. I'm interested in the ordinance and personnel, the utilities. I really like the Parks and Rec, but I think the finance is important. But thank you.
Yeah, Shane, so if you want to trade with me for the Parks and Rec and event stuff for Finance Committee, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So, okay. As updated, all we changed were the bottom three: ordinance, personnel, parks, rec, and events, and finance. So now for ordinance and personnel, we have myself, Trustee Barella, Trustee Harper. For parks, rec, and events, we have myself, Mayor Pro Tem Barney, and Trustee Bierma. And for finance, we have Trustee Lashley, Trustee Barella, and Trustee Harper. All right. Boards and commissions. There are a lot, but a good chunk of these are represented by staff and not trustees. The ones that I don't anticipate a trustee appointment include San Juan Development Association, Ambulance Board, Chamber of Commerce, Silverton Stakeholders, and the Four Corners Office for Resource Efficiency. I believe that some of us serve on some of these boards in other capacities as well, so there is opportunity for us to be updated and involved. And then Region 9, I spoke with Laura Marcino this last week, and in the past there's been a primary appointment and a secondary appointment. The primary appointment in the past has been either the mayor or a trustee, and the secondary appointment has been staff. I spoke with Administrator Ryder, and he'd like to be the primary appointment, which I assume would be fine with everybody. But if anyone has an issue with that, I know this feels out of order, but I'm trying to knock out the ones that we don't need to appoint ourselves for. And then we can have a secondary appointment for Region 9, but where it's not necessary. Does that sound good to everyone? Great. And then MSI in the past and Southwest Council of Governments have had representation from either the trustees or, well, Mountain Studies Institute has either had a trustee or staff, and Southwest Council of Governments has had a trustee. I spoke briefly with Administrator Ryder about the Southwest Council of Governments, and we weren't sure whether or not that was worth participation or not, and there may be fees involved with participation. Trustee Barella, yes.
So Southwest COG was going to charge us, what's it, between about $5,000 to $7,000 a year to be part of that board. I know our fees went up after La Plata County pulled out. So do we even want to hold a position in there? Because that's a big expenditure right now that I'm not sure we should be willing to put forth.
Thank you, Trustee Barella. I share the same concern. We have actually $3,000 earmarked. We haven't paid it yet this year for the Council of Governments. I have some concern about, what they do for us. I've asked a number of times, what do you do for Silverton? And I don't really get a great answer. They were instrumental in, getting internet and high speed and this and that. So it's to be discussed, and we do have something earmarked for them, but we haven't paid it yet. Just to let you know.
I think we should pull out of, this is Trustee Uyghur. I think we should pull out of that as well. I think that's a fantastic idea, Trustee Barella.
Trustee Harper.
I've worked with Marion and Southwest COG for many years. I think we could better utilize our money elsewhere.
I think that sounds great. I think I'm happy to continue a conversation with them and to see if at some point in the future it makes sense for us to reignite that relationship. But I'm with you guys and saving the town $3,000 on this one. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you. I I think everybody's kind of speaking here, and I think this needs to be an agenda item at a meeting in order for us to fully talk about it here. But I'm in support of what everybody else has said here so far. I think that they did so much work for the internet, and it's a group that we've been involved with. But seeing our neighbors in La Plata and some other counties around us start to fall away from it, I'm not sure that that's an organization that is serving us the way that they used to.
Trustee Barella?
He took my words. I'm good.
Great. And just, that's a great reminder, Trustee Lashley, we're not making any decisions tonight. If there are issues with the things that we've tentatively put placeholders on between now and Monday, we should discuss those on Monday when we do make final decisions. This is, as Trustee Lashley pointed out, just a work session. Okay.
Yeah, well said.
So the live, as Trustee Barella pointed out earlier, the library board and cemetery are typically the mayor as appointee. I don't know how much value I add to either of those. The library has a lot of really important stuff going on, and whoever's doing that should be, I think, very engaged. There's a series of grants that are coming down the pipeline and construction that is expected. Trustee Barella, yes?
Actually, it's not. The library board, I believe, voted to halt all further construction after the documents got finished for the scope of work. So we actually know it will be going into the future, because the public utilities and the sewer system are so much more dire that the library said, let's fix what needs to be fixed first, and then we can move on to the library building. So that was very important to say that any spare money that we can start getting should go into the utilities to fix our sewer system. Just so you know, so there is stuff coming on board with the library board, but one member of staff represents us, and that would be Mr. Ryder. So whomever takes that position, you know, it's a really great board to be on too. The meetings are enjoyable. The talk is about what we can do for the community, not how we're going to tax them or how we're going to take from them, what we can give to them. So it's an excellent board to be on. But the big projects, they've already said that they would put on hold for the sake of the sewer system. So just so everybody knows. So
further to that, and for clarification, it was my understanding that there are some $200,000 grants available to the library as a Carnegie library for renovation costs that wouldn't be available for to be reallocated to other things. Is that not true? Trustee Barella? Yep.
It's a grant that hasn't been written. It's a grant that hasn't been written. The only grant that was written was for the scope of work that was needed on the building. And those plans got finalized, I believe, 2 meetings ago. We got everything back from Ash and Reynolds. So we can always put those into play in a year or two and start getting into that grant cycle rotation, because we needed a $50,000 match going forward for each one anyway. So that's why the library board voted that if the town can use the $50,000 to help with sewer fund grants to match with that, it would be a far better use of money right now.
Got it. That's very, very helpful. Thank you. So for the time being, would we not have a representative other than Administrator Ryder on the library board until such time that there's opportunity to reignite projects relating to the library?
No, I'm pretty sure somebody has to be, one of the members of this group have to be on there. But I swear I don't know, I'd have to ask Jackie, but I swear it's always the mayor. I mean,
it has been, unless,
if I may, by the library ordinance, it's the mayor is the representative. The mayor appoints the board. We haven't necessarily followed that ordinance for the last couple of years, but I agree with Trustee Barella. It's a great board. I sit in as just a town representative in no official capacity, but It really works right now. And the folks on the board are well-meaning and represent the library well. So personally, I wouldn't see any reason to kind of change it at this point.
Okay, then I'll re-volunteer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The library is going to need some work for sure. We've got, yeah, as Trustee Barella mentioned, a couple of grants, matching money, budgeting, finance, this, that. The library needs some big work, and we can't put it off too much longer. Unfortunately, we're dealing with what we're dealing with now, but library is going to be right there. It needs help, and we want to make it great. So anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you. So it doesn't sound like the cemeteries had an active board for a while. I'm aware that at some point in the not too distant past, when the tombstone project was undertaken to mark a bunch of graves and provide additional descriptors, I'm guessing that was something done by the Historical Society. But the code does create a cemetery board. It seems like in our revising, perhaps this should be grouped under or something designated. Well, I suppose we still would need a representative. Trustee Lashley?
Yeah, I think that Todd Bove has kind of served as the town representative towards that fund, or at least he seems to be the staff member who always knows the most about it whenever we've talked about it at our budget meetings. I don't know if the cemetery board's bylaws require that a member of town board or just a representative of the town serve for that, but I'm going to throw Todd under the bus and say let's see if Todd will do it.
So
if
I'm looking for the support in the code itself for a cemetery board. That was something that was in some town documents saying that we had a cemetery board. The cemetery falls under the Building and Grounds Committee in the code as it's written today, and there isn't reference to a specific cemetery board. I suppose we had some.
I think the Building and Grounds Committee could easily encompass, the cemetery as part of the group as well, okay, if we need to make changes for that.
So this one it looks like just change because there's nothing in the code that would need to be revised, but I can do some additional review to make sure that that's the case. Administrator Ryder, any issues with that?
I'm trying not to smirk. Administrator Ryder didn't know there was a cemetery board up until a day ago. So
okay,
whatever you need us to do, we'll do it. I do know the Historical Society is involved and in maintenance and getting grants and giving it its due course. But as far as town staff, we'll have to look into it and see what, if any, our responsibility is, and if there's a board.
Okay, thank you.
There's also a very healthy cemetery fund as well in the town that we've discussed. Maybe we should look at ways to at least use that money, or ways to reincorporate it into a different fund, or whatever, whatever would work.
You are absolutely correct. I want to say it's in the neighborhood of $20,000 or $25,000 that's in that fund. So yes, there is definitely reserve funding available.
Trustee Barella.
Wasn't there a project that was being talked about where they went back through and started redoing the some of the cemetery walls, the retaining walls? I think it was Todd that spoke to it, that we had a few issues just in a few areas. The older ones that were the originally Italian Mason ones were excellent condition, but some of the newer ones needed to be fixed. And I'm not sure whatever happened with that. Just an FYI for everyone.
Yeah, that one, Trustee Barilla, I'm not aware of. I do know that we wrote a letter of support. Bev Rich and Casey were actually applying for a grant to go back and survey, I think since 2004, is the last time they actually did a survey of the plots and who was resting there, et cetera, and to update that into 2020. Actual physical work I'm not aware of, but I'll ask them and see if something like that's in process.
Okay.
So now we get to some significant substance. The Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Adjustments have pretty detailed sections in our town code in terms of who's appointed and what their scope is. To summarize, well, let's not summarize. Going straight to Division 2 of the town code under Article 2, the Planning Commission consists of 7 members, 2 members of this board, and 1 member from the County Commissioner Board, and 4 members at large appointed by the Planning Commission. The purpose is to make and adopt a master plan for the physical development of the town, including any areas outside its boundaries, subject to the approval of the governmental body having jurisdiction thereof. In the preparation of the master plan, the Planning Commission shall make careful and comprehensive studies of the existing conditions and probable future growth of the territory. The master plan, there's a couple more sentences about the master plan. Planning Commission shall also recommend the boundaries of the various zoning districts and appropriate regulations to be enforced therein. Such regulations shall be made in accordance with the comprehensive plan and designed to lessen congestion in the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, floodwaters, and other dangers, and to promote health, general welfare, to provide adequate light and air, and so on and so forth. The current iteration of the Planning Commission has also absorbed the Historic Review Committee. That appears to be one committee at this point. And it seems that that is the most active of the committees we're going to talk about. The Zoning Board of Adjustments, I have to skip to that, is 5 members rather than 7, but it does still include 2 members from this board who are not also members of the Planning Commission, and 2 members serving at large on the Planning Commission, appointed by the Planning Commission. So two more members that weren't members of the Planning Commission, plus 2 people from the Planning Commission. And then 1 county commissioner who isn't on the Planning Commission. And that is 5. The purpose of the Zoning Board of Adjustments is to review petitions from aggrieved parties or applicants for variances, or by order of this board, to discuss matters related to zoning and variance requests. As some other context, it seems that this committee should be one of our most important committees until we do have a master plan and an updated town code, because this will be the committee that's reviewing any proposals for development that require variances, which in my view were somewhat at risk in terms of development potential with some of the criticism of the Kendall Master Plan RFI has been the potential for real estate speculation. And if things like that do proceed, or if other windfalls befall the town and things start to change in some way, this is the commission that I think will be our protectors, if you will. Trustee Barilla?
No matter what, you have to go, if you're on any of these, you have to go with what's written currently. Nothing has been changed. So in my 2 years, we've been talking about the master plan and I have yet to see an updated one. And I know that we've just finally started working because I think we actually have a really competent staff with Lisa Adair, and she loves to get into the minutia and find out all the detail. So we still have to vote currently on what's written versus what we think will be written. So that's always something to remember. For the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustments, that's a tougher group. That really is a tougher group because you have to look at what's written and you have to look at the value of what it is to the town currently. I'd rather be on the Planning Commission than the Board of Adjustments, just saying. But I don't want either one.
So I'd like to make a proposal for everyone to consider. I don't expect any sort of decision this evening. But it seems to me that the Planning Commission has a lot on its plate. I mean, I was looking at the Planning Commission agenda for tomorrow and it's significant, and it seems that it will continue to be significant. Although the primary purpose and the code of the Planning Commission is to develop the master plan, I think it would behoove the town to have an independent master planning committee with Lisa Adair as the primary lead on behalf of the town, that still has a similar composition of 2 members from this board, a county commissioner, because we of course need to work closely with the county and the town's master plan, and then the number of members at large from the community that can be solely focused on the development of the master plan. I know that there's been things in the works by the Planning Commission for a while, and there's a 80 or 90 page document with recommended updates. But if you've read through the 2010 master plan, I'm not sure that updates are quite sufficient. And to my knowledge, in the last 5 years, there haven't been any formal community engagement initiatives or visioning sessions for what an update or overhaul to the master plan should look like. And I don't think that that's because there hasn't been an effort to have transparency or community engagement. I just think that the commission is overwhelmed. And so I would like everyone to consider the idea of separating these responsibilities. Trustee Barella?
What was his name? Revis. He had proposed and was getting ready to start doing a whole bunch of I don't know, section by section with the town and do visioning by neighborhood, by what they considered neighborhood, whether if you were in an ED neighborhood or if you were in an R1, R2, R2A. So
by zoning.
By zone, yeah. And that's how he had envisioned going forth, because some people complain that they're in an ED and the whole ED section of that has turned into houses, but it wasn't when it was originally zoned that. And so that was part of the plan. But obviously Mr. Revis isn't here anymore. And these are very big things. These are massive things that this should be, I don't know, this should be something that we should all be looking forward to seeing what the revisions are, or what do people think they need to be. But as I've said, I mean, I know the Planning Commission has a whole bunch on their board. I have never been jealous of either Trustee Lashley or Trustee Wiegert for having to go to a lot of those meetings, because it's big, but we need to know. There are things that have come in front of us that we are asked to make a final decision for, that the Planning Commission votes do it, but we have no background and no history. And we don't even know what ordinances things are being based on. So I guess there's a bit of a lack of not necessarily good communication, but appropriate communication. Members of the town have asked before where the Planning Commission board meeting minutes go, and I think we had a plan to start putting them on the town board website. And there's been a lot of things that have fallen through the cracks. So I believe we have a cohesive enough board right now that we can actually probably get a little more done and have a little bit better communication.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I do think since the Planning Commission is established by the town code, it falls on us to ensure that although there are many other members and we're only 2 of 7, it falls on us to make sure that the rules and regulations are responsibly followed. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I think you've said that pretty well, actually. The Planning Commission and also our planner, the staff in kind of in charge of running those meetings, it becomes really overwhelming really quick for the Planning Commission and for Lisa Adair to kind of sort through this master planning process with a lot of the things that have come in front of us, especially since that organization represents both the town and the county. We've had a lot of county projects that have been coming at us lately that kind of have impacted our ability to get to the master plan. And I think it would really help the planner to be able to have a group that would work more with her collaboratively to create this document of the master plan as more of a guide to this process. And I think that that the Planning Commission would be more effective at getting those projects kind of vetted for both the county commissioners and the town board or the Board of Adjustment would better serve that group. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what the Planning Commission thinks of that. But we have a meeting tomorrow, so that's a great topic to bring up and see how they feel about it and have a discussion with the larger town board after that.
Trustee Barilla.
Yeah, I truly am in favor of trying to maybe split that apart and having one just be the concentrate on what the existing laws are. Then the Board of Variance or Adjustment says, okay, we'll make this slight adjustment if you fit into this neighborhood, where the master plan, that could be, that's potentially a very big thing that we need to redo. And it does seem like it's too much for the Planning Commission. So I really think that that's a very interesting take and a nice way to move forward.
Trustee Harper.
Why, I propose we make it a group thing. That came out, a group, sorry, like collaborative.
Okay, staff is laughing.
A true master planning group. That's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry.
Can you provide some additional details around like what that means?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, John. With all of our backgrounds, with all of our understanding, using your key points, Mr. Mayor, why can't we have it a true group discussion? Mayor Pro Tem, all the trustees. I think it'd be something interesting we could all work on together.
So the idea being, I mean, for the master planning process, I think to succeed, in addition to the trustee group, we also will need a county commissioner and certainly some members of the public. And so I'm just trying to figure out what the actionable version of that is. You're saying like do we do a handful of brainstorming sessions first and then create a committee, or what's the, can we take it just a little further?
If you're talking about bringing in Lisa to set up a whole separate deal, why can't we all as a group be a part of it and have that true discussion together?
So I think that many voices.
I have a migraine headache, so I apologize. I'm just squinting, I'm all over the place.
But I think the idea of having all of our input is incredibly important. But I think to be able to create work product efficiently, there needs to be a smaller group, of 5 or 7 that can move the project forward. That doesn't mean that the whole trustee group wouldn't participate in a meaningful way, I think, in the development of the master plan, and certainly would need to vote at each critical stage. I think of the master plan committee that when I was brainstorming this, and this again was just a proposal, there's nothing that we need to decide on at this moment, to be quite similar to the Kendall committee, which I think we've seen.
That's what I was thinking. a true collaborative effort.
Right. So on the Kendall committee, we have one town trustee member. We have 3 members of the public. We have 4 members of the public, 1 county commissioner, and I'm sorry, someone from the planning commission that isn't a county commissioner, I believe. But in any event, it's about 7 people as opposed to the 7 of us plus a county commissioner plus members of the public. And when we've found more people involved in each stage of iteration of project development, it stalls out. And that committee has even created subcommittees that have done most of the work and then presented the work that they've done for discussion to the bigger group, and then decisions are made with the bigger group. And that seemed like a very effective process. There were a bunch of hands. Trustee Lashley has his up still, and then Trustee Barella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really important what Jim said, that we all get to have our ability to put input in on the master plan. And I think maybe we should have some specific work sessions where we get to focus on things that as town trustees we'd like to see in the master plan. But just as you said, yeah, the group, if we went with us all doing it as a collaborative event, then we'd be having all of the county commissioners too. And we can barely herd them into 3 to 4 meetings a year with us as it is. But I do support the idea of making kind of a separate committee. And I mean, those would be publicly noticed meetings too. So I think we could all show up if we have members of the community and that there too.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
So I would have to say that we would need to, couple members of the community, 1 county commissioner, 1 planning department that's not a county commissioner or a trustee. The whole setup, like everybody's talking, is perfect. But the visioning sessions, Lisa did a masterful job putting those together for Kendall. And so with that going forward, with that mindset and doing it community-wide versus doing it by neighborhood, but then identifying what each section says is wrong with their neighborhood, and then pulling all that information together. Not that Lisa needs another million things to do, but she is excellent at that format, at the data gathering, everything. And then you've got Lisa Adair that could come in over the top and start reviewing what was said in that respect and saying, okay, this is why this happens in your neighborhood, and this is why this happens, because the community does want to be involved. That's a major thing. That's probably more things I've been bitched at any time that I have been a trustee, when people come and scream in your face because you didn't do what they wanted. That's probably been one of the biggest ones, was how can they do that in my neighborhood, or how can they vote to put that there, or who's got oversight on that? And so the public does want to know. And so I think this is an excellent way going forward. And then you could break it off into additional subcommittees, back to the point, where you could have 3 different trustees looking at 1 section of the zoning, and or whatever we decide as a collective. And then you could have, what, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we could probably get, including a staff member, we could get some really good subcommittees that would dump in information as well. And you're looking at probably the next 2 years of our lives if we really want to move forward with a real master planning committee that is not part of the planning commission.
Thank you. I think that's great. Trustee Wiegert?
If I may, as somebody who's been involved with the master planning process for the past 4 years now, right now where we're at, based on my understanding of the situation, is we're at a revision. Now, I believe there's a state statute or something that says that there should be every 10 or 15 years, then you go over the entire master plan and completely rewrite it. But I don't think that's where we're at right now. We're actually about 3 years behind a revision on the master plan. And so we're looking to revise this every 5 to 7 years. you know, we're about halfway there towards another revision. So just something to think about. We're already way behind on this. Maybe we should just work on the revision, get that in, and then we can really focus on rewriting the master plan 5 years from now.
Thank you for your input.
Mhm.
Trustee Lashley.
Yeah, Jess, I think that's going to be super important to hear from the members of the Planning Commission committee and see how they feel about it and whether we want to make that effort to go through and finish it. I definitely feel like at this point it's pretty scattered, kind of between what Mr. Rivas left Lisa Adair and us kind of being about 3 years behind on it. Either we're going to have to get moving on it here really quickly in order to get these revisions kind of timely done, or I think we should consider turning it over to a group who will.
That's
Just for
fine.
quick
All I'm
clar-
just saying is right now, you know, we should be focused on revisions and not trying to rewrite a whole brand new master plan, because that's just going to put us further behind, in my opinion.
To clarify, the master plan is from 2010. So we're
Yeah,
10 years behind.
And
or
the
5 years
document
behind.
and the document was kind of focused, or at least the efforts of the Planning Commission were mostly focused on kind of updating certain sections of it, just as Trustee Wiegert said, not a complete redo for sure. Yeah, I agree with you there, Jess.
Trustee Barella.
Oh, well, I was just going to ask Austin and Jess, sorry, if they can think of any other reasons that it's been bogged down. Obviously, I understand Mr. Rivas and then changing, and then before him we had somebody else in there. So is it the staff changing through so much in that position, or is it just too much on the plate of the Planning Commission? So just curious what you guys think.
Trustee Barella, I think it's a combination of those two things, the turnover of staff and we had a pretty busy summer, especially with a lot of different county applications that are really full. And just if you ever come to the Planning Commission meetings, our packets are really large. They take a lot of planning to get together from our planner. So being able to separate out some of that process into a different meeting, at least, I think would help Lisa there incredibly.
Yeah, I would agree with Trustee Lashley that it's been, I would say primarily it's been due to turnover of staff and the fact that we have been able to keep our town and county planner for more than a year in 3 separate situations with what was probably 7 or 8 months where the position was unfilled and where it was taken over by our county administrator, Willie Tukey. So at that point, there was no master planning going on, you know, and also many applications that were just sitting on the desk waiting for somebody to go through. And now I think Lisa's finally had the opportunity to get caught up on all the back paperwork, and I think we're working through it. And hopefully now we can start to focus on some of these other things that have been neglected. But I think it has been a turnover of staff that's really created these issues.
Do you think that you made a pretty strong case for revisions as opposed to overhaul? Do you think that revisions will be sufficient with all of the, I can't quite see what. Oh, look at that. Goal number 2. Do you think that revisions will be sufficient at this stage with all of the moving parts coming on in the relative near future, an overhaul of our water treatment system, potentially Kendall Mountain development, the Baker Park Trail system? There's a lot. I think we're going to get a conversation going with Anthony Edwards sometime relatively soon about a Caldera initiative that he's been working on for additional funding that open up a lot of avenues for additional walking trails or money for wayfinding, or the incorporation of the Blair Street project and seeing new sidewalks and lights. Like like, is the scope of all of the stuff that's happening right now, you think sufficiently covered by a revision to the master plan, or is that something that, you know, would it be better to use that as a base and kind of re-examine what our future looks like and how we want to maintain the essence of Silverton while seeing all of these changes take place?
If that was directed towards me, I personally feel like we need to get back on schedule with our master plan revision schedule. The point you bring up, I think it would be beneficial to be diligent and thorough, but I'll also say that 4 years goes by really quick. And so, especially if we're living in a seasonal economy, normal years, summers kick off, and then people on the board have not had time to do this kind of stuff. So it may seem like we have all the time in the world right now with everything on lockdown and our economy shut down, but just realize what we're getting into here. Creating a master plan, we're talking about thousands of hours of work.
And would you see any benefit in the commission continuing to work towards these revisions while a new committee attempted to begin the process? So taking into account that these revisions have taken 4 years, not in total because of all the changeover, but they've still taken a significant amount of time. We're 3 years behind on a 5-year update to the master plan. If it takes another 1 to 2 years to incorporate these revisions, wouldn't it be prudent to also create this committee to start the visioning sessions, maybe not getting in the way of the work that the planning commission's already done, but getting ahead of the work to adopt a new master plan by 2025, if that is thousands of hours and years of work?
If that's the only thing that you want to focus on, then yeah. Okay. But there's a lot on our plates here, and master plan process is only one small portion of the entire meal. And so I just like everybody to be cognizant of that.
Okay. I take the view that we need an overarching outline to help us be organized in our steps forward, but I have a lot to learn still, and I'm excited to learn about, you know, all of the reasons why maybe that's not the best use of our time. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that these are a lot of different projects, and we kind of do have to pick and choose a little bit which ones we think are more important to tackle and which ones we can kind of create extra help or extra committees to utilize. Like to me, the master plan and revising our town code are kind of two separate things, and we kind of might have to choose which one is more important to us as town board members if we start taking on more responsibilities as far as the master plan is concerned. Yeah, okay. And maybe it does make more sense if we talk about it rather than adopting a new master plan and going through a new master planning process, other than revisions to focus on our town code. But I'd be interested to see how some of the other trustees feel about that as well.
Trustee Burrell. You're still muted.
Okay. I know John didn't get this until today, but I went through all of my notes and documents and these papers that I'm holding up. This is the mission and the goals of the town board. And it was to act in the best interest of town by recognizing and validating the various points of view, establishing clear and concise procedures, balancing the environment, economic, historic assets of Silverton, and fostering a sense of community. And in number 2, our number 2 goal for the 2 years we worked on this was to protect and preserve community assets through infrastructure, proper planning, and investment. Goal number 2 was master planning to include wayfinding, land use codes, water rights, and then obviously more grants. So these are things that we've identified previously as part of our goals. And this is what we had talked about during your first meeting. Mr. Ryder will get you these. Unfortunately, I don't have a scanner at my house down in Durango, so I just had to screenshot it and send it to him. But reading those, it puts it into perspective what we already have collectively, tried to work towards and have goals of. So both of those are on goal number 2. So it's hard to say what's a good use of our time. Like Mr. Wiegert's been saying, is it, half a dozen of one or half a dozen of the other? So if we start working at a diligent pace, then I think we can accomplish both. We don't need to rewrite the town code necessarily, word for word. This is what was proposed to us before, and I thought the idea was excellent. There were other town codes that were already recently vetted and adopted, and all we'd have to do is basically pick out sections and start reading them and going through and saying, yes, we want this, or let's add this. So we're not reinventing the wheel. Same way with the master plan. You've got a plan already there. You've got revisions sitting there. So what's wrong with trying to take all of that information and cohesively put it together? So I think we're all on the right path. We've all got the same agendas and ideas going forward. It's just, what is the structure going to look like to put it all into place? So we already have a ordinance and personnel code. That's a committee that's already established that we work with staff. So is it better to go the route of the design of the Kendall Commission in order to put this other wheel moving forward? So thoughts?
That's, I think, very, very well put. And whether or not we pursue a completion of the revision process or an overhaul, it still seems like it would be helpful to break this out into a separate committee. And it still seems like we're at an inflection point where community input would be very, very helpful. And before we make any decisions, I think would need anyone who's providing input, myself especially, would need to become updated on what the status of the revision process is, because I certainly don't want to derail something if it's close to completion. But I think I still would recommend breaking out either the revisions or updating the master plan with a new plan as a separate body, like we discussed earlier. Trustee Lashley.
I think it's a great idea to consider right now, and I think we can work on that. I'm interested to see what the members of the Planning Commission would like to say about it as well. So, but I think it's a creative idea, at least to consider. So hopefully we can discuss it further.
So thank you for considering that idea and humoring me in that discussion. Assuming no changes are made, I'm curious to see who we have interested in participating in the Planning Commission and Historical Review Board as a single entity, and who we have interested in participating in the Zoning Board of Adjustments. If I could see hands on who's interested in participating in the Planning Commission. I see Trustee Wiegert, Lashley, and Harper. And if I could see hands on who's interested in participating in the Zoning Board of Adjustments.
I'm already on there, so.
I see Trustee Harper and Mayor Pro Tem Barney and myself.
Mayor Furman, here's what I wanted to say about kind of both of those. I think both of those meet at a really inconvenient time for being a teacher.
So the Planning Commission are those normally at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays? Or is that an abnormal?
Oh, I thought they were during the day.
Yeah, third Tuesday at usually 7 p.m. is the Planning Commission. When does the Board of Adjustment normally meet?
I thought they were both daytime, so I could be wrong about both of them.
Board of Adjustments. Board of Adjustments, I believe, only meets when there's something that a variance that needs to be adjusted.
Correct.
Okay.
So Trustee Harper, do you have you cannot be on both according to the code. May I ask what your preference would be between the two?
Planning Commission.
So we have Trustee Wiegert, Lashley, and Harper with interest in the Planning Commission, myself, Trustee Wiegert, and Mayor. Were you asking a question, Mayor Pro Tem, or volunteering?
I guess more asking a question and trying not to volunteer.
Okay, so then Trustee Wiegert, so you volunteered for both as well. Which one would you have a stronger preference to participate in?
I will just say that I've really enjoyed being a member on the Planning Commission to represent the town trustees, and really appreciate that. I would like to stay on the Planning Commission. I feel like I've got a good relationship with the board. It's stuff that I'm really interested in. Some of the funner meetings I have attended over the past 4 years. I also feel like it's important that we bring a little different perspective to these boards. Do we really need trustees that are all business owners to be members of some of these most important commissions? Or should we try to have a diverse appointment where we have people who are not only business owners, but also people in the working class? With that being said, if the rest of the board, the trustees, feel like it's better that we switch it up and we have somebody new in the town trustee representation on the Planning Commission, I'm okay with that. And I'd be happy to serve on something else, but I would personally prefer to go back to 2 more years on the Planning Commission.
What? Go ahead, Trustee Lashley.
Thanks. Yeah, I can completely agree with what Jess has said here. I've enjoyed being on the Planning Commission, but I could be on the Board of Adjustment as well. Normally, I think the rule is so that there is some continuity between town board members on the Planning Commission. But I am running for county commissioner as well, so it probably doesn't make much sense to say it, but there's a chance that it may turn over in another 6 months too, if I have to represent the county commissioners as on the Planning Commission versus being a member of the town board.
Thank you. I think the continuity one is a good one, and it looks like we don't have much of a conflict here if we were to appoint Trustee Harper and Trustee Wiegert to the Planning Commission, and myself and Trustee Lashley to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. Any further discussion or comment there? Does that sound good to everyone? Great.
I don't envy any of you.
So then on our list, we have Kendall. Kendall's an interesting one because Mayor Pro Tem Barney, Trustee Lashley, and myself were on that committee with Mayor Pro Tem Barney and myself as community members at large, and Trustee Lashley was the appointed representative from the town. The committee met and had a strong preference in there being continuity with the town. And of the 3 of us, the discussion among the committee that I would hope to gain support from here would be for Mayor Pro Tem Barney to continue as the town representative. That's at an interesting inflection point with the RFI out. The date's been extended through July for responses, and following the RFI, there'll be a lot of discussion about what next steps should look like. The meetings are open to, and I think Trustee Lashley and myself continue to attend the meetings, whether by Zoom or phone or in person when the meetings pick back up, but not necessarily in an official capacity. So I know a few of you have expressed interest in joining the Kendall committee, so I'd like to open up now to discussion. Trustee Barilla.
Just a quick question. So the advertisement that Lisa Branner put out was for one or for two of all of you, basically, right? Because one,
yeah, so
one gets to
replacing the two members at large.
Yes. Okay. And was Mr. Lashley still interested in continuing, or I didn't see why?
Yeah, the discussion that we had was really similar to what the discussion that we just had for the Planning Commission as well. The chances are pretty strong that if I am elected to the San Juan County Commissioners Board, that I will again be serving on that board as a San Juan County Commissioner instead of as a Town of Silverton person. So in keeping continuity going, I had planned on kind of attending those meetings, but as a member of the public rather than necessarily as a voting member of that board. And then if the Kendall, as this kind of Kendall process keeps going, I'll be there if they have any questions for me, but otherwise I'll just keep close attention on the anticipation that I may be there again. And then that makes the two at-large members easily replaced that are now a member of this board. That's just something that we discussed as the committee, but yeah, I agreed with Mayor Furman, and actually in the meeting, I'm the one who brought up that if they wanted to see one of the other two members of the town board serve as that role of Kendall, that I felt that they had a lot more passion and involvement in the project, that kind of as a town board member already, and other commitments like things like the Planning Commission, that I felt like Kendall was stretching me a little thin.
Trustee Barilla.
And then the one other question would be for Trustee Bierma. I mean, we haven't heard you volunteering anything right now, so I'm just curious if you're interested in this before. I mean, obviously Mayor Pro Tem Barney has got the knowledge, but is there anything else that you're truly interested in that you haven't spoken about yet?
No, not yet. I just brought up my interest when we were on the committees, and I think Sally would be, or sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Barney would be great on the Kendall board still, and I have participated that as just a public citizen, and I will probably continue to participate in that way.
Okay. And what about Mr. Harper? Any interest in Kendall? Just making sure we get all the bases covered, because before it was left up to Austin and I appointed him because I said I wasn't going to do it, because we didn't know whether or not Jess would get reelected. So we only had two people that were given choices the first time. So that's why I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak to it.
Trustee Harper.
Oh, I apologize.
That was Trustee Barilla asking about your interest.
I am very interested in the Kendall Mountain project. I'm interested in all of it. What I believe is folks that are clearly more passionate about it than me. I like to ski. I haven't been on one in 20 years. Guys my size don't belong on skis. That's just a thing. I read that somewhere. But I am interested in it. But I think I picked 4. And I think that's all we get, right?
Well, we only get one representation from the town board on that group. So that's why I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Not that Mayor Pro Tem Barney needs someone speaking for her, but the Kendall committee's become a bit of a weekly commitment. Every other week, the large committee meets, and almost the subcommittee's been meeting. That may slow down a little bit as we wait for RFI responses, but Mayor Pro Tem Barney's been at the majority of those meetings, and is also leading the kids ski program and doing a lot of things in the community that I think support our support for her being the town representative. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Thank you. The other thing I was going to say too, Trustee Harper, is that, I mean, I am passionate about this committee, and I would be very honored to continue in that capacity on the committee now as the role of town, but just to carry over the same knowledge. But it is an open application process right now. So there's always the, if you wanted to participate, you could always apply like the other citizens, right? And participate as a citizen. Oh,
We
you
have
can't.
the same issue. We can only have one town trustee.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why we can't be on it.
Forget it. Okay.
But you can attend all the meetings, and I'd love for more people to attend the meetings and to. I mean, that's been the biggest struggle, is disseminating information from the meetings to the public with only Facebook and the newspaper as outlets. And the more people attend, I think the easier it will be to have discussions around what the different potential development options are there.
Fantastic.
And the last one is Jess. Did you have any interest in it?
I think it's a great project, very worthwhile. I'm with Jordan on this one. I'd prefer to participate in this one as a participant, public, and not be with the board. So hopefully we can. Nope, I'm good with that.
Fantastic. So tentatively, we've worked our way through all of the proposed appointments for us all to sleep on for a week and adopt or revisit as needed at our meeting on Monday. Are there any other questions about the boards, committees, or commissions before we move on? Wonderful. Thank you all.
One.
Trustee Brella, yes.
I just want to make sure that when we go into our, what were we calling those? Standing committees, backgrounds, public safety, all of that, we should go in right away. Previously, we were told that staff had to call the meeting, but I can't find anywhere that it says that. So we need to assign a chair at the next meeting to each one of those standing committees. So that way, that chair and the staff, I guess, I don't know. We need to make a procedural, because this is where we were lacking things before. This is why we always had policy and procedure on our list, because who does this? It doesn't actually say in the code. I could never find a reference to it. So who calls the meeting? When do we do it? If we're going to create a chairperson of that meeting, does the chair call it with staff? Does the chair call it alone? This is procedure that we need to look at. I don't know if we all want to email Mr. Ryder some ideas in reference to this, or what we think going forward, how these committees should be done. But I think we should meet at least once a quarter, if not more, on some of these. I'm telling you, I was on, I think, two that we didn't ever meet at all. So, and there are issues in these things because it comes to us as board members on the street, or in a meeting. Then you're like, wow, I didn't even think of that. Why didn't we have a subcommittee meeting about that? So, or a standing committee meeting. So this is something that we really need to do. It's kind of hard when you just get thrown in, which I know all of us kind of were initially. So this is so much a better process, because we actually get to talk it out, get to see what people think, instead of just going, hey, guess what you get to do, and not having any knowledge going forward. So at least this discussion has put a lot of these ideas forth. That's actually why when I was talking to Mayor, we were going back and forth, and I said, no, I really think a work session is necessary, because it gives you the necessary tools trying to go forward with this. So thank you all. I know it was a long meeting, but very appreciated. This is probably one of the best communications as a collective that I think we've had in quite a while.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So
Trustee Burrell, I couldn't agree more. You guys need to be informed. So however we do that going forward, it would be great. I know you guys get pinged at the grocery store and whatnot, and anything we as staff can do to make sure you're always informed, you know, that's the way it's got to be. So let us know.
thank you. So in terms of follow-ups between now and the next meeting, I have the distribution of the draft appointment worksheet, which I'll share with Administrator Ryder, just so he can compare notes and make sure that we got it down right and have that sent to everyone. Administrator Ryder, do you think between now and the next meeting, the staff will have time to put together a quick description of either what the boards currently are or what they should be, so that we can also hopefully address Trustee Harper's concerns before we have an actual vote on these appointments? Trustee Ryder? I'm sorry, Administrator Ryder?
Whoops, sorry. Yep, jumping back here. Yes, we can absolutely do that.
Wonderful. And then I would ask everyone to think about their interest in chairing the respective committees, so that we can also make that determination following
Kelly,
Trustee Barella's suggestion.
make sure that gets on the list, please. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Trustee Lashley?
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think the descriptions, you know, we kind of hammered out the details as far as like what we're going to be doing, but I think we may need to have another work session where I think it'll be more important to have those descriptions in order to kind of figure out how we're going to tweak these different committees so that we can get the proper, we can kind of get everything properly laid out the way that we'd like to see it.
Trustee Barella?
Don't forget all the work that we do, even in a work session, when we take it to either resolution or ordinance. And if it's done right, we're laying the groundwork for future boards, because it has been a struggle to get through some of this because we don't have the proper, I'm going to use a Judy Graham policy and procedure in place in some of these items, because we really were just guessing. And so the groundwork is essential. So thank you.
Thank you. And then Administrator Ryder, I suppose the other thing we'd like guidance on is how best to, or understanding the process and timing for updating the code to reflect the revisions to the committees, commissions, and boards that we are discussing. At least the Parks and Rec and Buildings and Grounds, I think, will be non-controversial updates to be more aligned with what's actually happening. And then the other ones that require more discussion will probably follow a similar process. So if we can have a better sense of what that is and make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's in that process, that'd be great.
Yeah, and to that end, we've already started with the zoning code. It's a bit of a mess, and we've got a zoning code committee already formed within the staff. Lisa Adair, Bill McDougall, myself, and we'll be answering to the board here shortly with our work, but we're literally going code by code, line item by line item to update all of that, and we'll be reporting to you shortly.
Thank you so much. So this meeting's almost 2.5 hours in. We did have another section to it, but I think I'd like to propose a way to manage that section without keeping us on the line much longer. We were going to discuss meeting protocols and process primarily. And perhaps the best thing to do would be to have the current meeting protocols shared with us, which I have not seen in writing. And
really, you don't have them memorized? You've not every single meeting, every single time. Yeah, sorry. I think I have 3 copies if you'd like one.
I would love one. And I'd love everybody to see them, because what it sounds like because I've touched base with everyone on this call, and it sounds like everyone would appreciate the opportunity to at least look at them under the current circumstances and whether or not we can distill them down to be more applicable to what our philosophy is as this iteration of the board. And so if we can have those shared, I think it'd be great if we could spend some time between now and Monday, and we don't necessarily have to make a decision on Monday, but if we could each have some notes or comments and able to engage in a discussion about what a revision to the protocols might look like for this group. Trustee Brella.
Posting them instead of having them to read them every time. Oh my Lord.
So,
Yeah.
And I'm going to drop a bomb here. My one big, I think, request for us all to consider that relates to the meeting process. So I would like us as a group and with community input to develop a town mission and possibly a town vision, which I don't believe we have or have had in at least the last decade. Is that a draft of the mission and vision that the last trustee group put together?
Yep. Mr. Ryder's gonna forward it to everybody.
Okay, I would love to see that. And my controversial request would be that we consider reading that instead of the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of each meeting.
Ooh. Or both. I like the Pledge of Allegiance.
So my thinking here is that it's not that I don't feel a strong amount of affiliation with the United States or anything like that, but I do understand that the Pledge of Allegiance, there are mixed feelings throughout our community on the Pledge of Allegiance, and to start our meetings with that as the undertone, I feel creates a bit of divisiveness. Whereas reading a town mission or a town vision helps guide our meeting and set the principles upon which we're hopefully basing all of our decisions as we go throughout. I know this is not going to be the most popular among everyone, but I would consider it and discuss it, and I'd like to hear the different viewpoints. Trustee Barney, Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Are you proposing that we have that discussion right now, or that we think about it and table the discussion and have it later? It's a question.
Well, since I don't think we can make decisions, I'm fine just putting that idea out there for us to consider and come back to. But I'm also curious if other people want to talk about it now. I'm open to that as well. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you. You know, I don't feel super strongly about it one way or another, but when you say divisive, that strikes a little bit of a chord with me. My first meeting ever as a trustee, our first meeting, Molly, as a trustee, we had a member of the public threaten a trustee member for not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And that doesn't set a good tone for the meeting, for sure. So when you say divisive, I do understand what you mean. Yeah, I don't feel super strongly about it one way or the other, but I think that's yeah, I'll have to think about that a little more.
And if nobody wishes to talk about this right now, that's okay as well. Trustee Harper.
We live in the United States of America. Right now, we're going through a real difficult time, both nationally, regionally, globally. These are the times where tradition, even if it's just a little bit, brings us all that much more together. And I do not believe this is the time to be removing our Pledge of Allegiance. It's who we are. We're 50 states that come together as one. And again, right now, these are some real tough, difficult times, and being on the front line and running this food bank, I can tell you people are scared, people are nervous. There is a sense of that they don't know what the future has. And us coming together as one cohesive unit, whether it is behind our state flag or our national flag, that's important for all of us. And it may be not for some, but it is for this community because it shows that we're truly united. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to discuss it. I guess my questions about this in this discussion, to just kind of kick it off, would be, I would just ask the question, does the pledge do those things for our community? And what is the intent behind I know there's a history in why we have the meeting formalities set up the way that they are. I think the purpose behind them is to create respect between trustees and between trustee to public, and a cordial tone so that the board can work hard and do its job. And I would wonder if the pledge, and I'd put some other things in that category as well, just the list, the actual items on the long list that gets read at the beginning of each meeting. I'm just curious to know about where those came from and if they accomplish their mission, and what can we do as, new people to the board to make it meaningful to all of us in a cohesive statement, or a cohesive foot that we put forward as we're a new group, we're a new team. So what is it that how do we put our best foot forward?
I'll give you a little background there, Mayor Pro Tem Barney, on the protocols. Those were actually developed during the retreat that we had during my first year, so 4 years ago, as a way that we could, like you said, present formalities and treat each other with dignity and respect, and gain control of the meetings and operate more efficiently. So that's where those have come from. Now, if we choose not to read them before every meeting, I'm fine with that. If they're just simply posted on a board where everybody can see it. But I think they are important parts to running a successful meeting.
Can I jump in real quick? So I think what Mayor Pro Tem Barney said was what I intended. She said it better than I did, which is looking at our intent, which I think that a town mission and vision, and I'm not saying anything bad about the Pledge of Allegiance either, I want to clarify that, but a town mission and vision, I think, unifies us even more specifically as a community, and hopefully creates that comfort and feeling of neighbor to neighbor, even more so than a national version of a mission and vision might. And that's why I thought replacing it, I wasn't suggesting that we delete one and not replace it, but because I understand what the intent of the pledge is, I was hoping to come up with maybe an even more effective version of that to start each meeting. And then to Trustee Wiegert's point, I agree that the protocols are helpful and help us guide the meeting in a productive way. And with that, I wasn't recommending that we not have protocols, but that we review each and every one of them as they are and engage in a work session or discussion around whether or not we would like to consolidate them or revise them in some way to be even more specific to this iteration of the trustee board. Trustee Barney, and then Trustee Barella. Mayor Pro Tem Barney, and then
Yeah,
Trustee Barella.
thank you, Mayor. And I know that Trustee Bierma has a comment on this subject as well. I also wanted to just share that this, this is what we do at school every year, is to revise and revamp and recreate a set of norms or guiding agreements with each other to just help our work be effective, like what Trustee Wiegert was describing. How can we be productive and effective? And the act, and also what Trustee Wiegert said, in a retreat seems like a really good place to do that. Because I think the act of doing that, the act of creating those statements with each other and those agreements, it's just really useful in getting to know each other and who we are and what we value and where we're coming from. So I'm really in favor of participating in that process.
Trustee Barella.
Oh, I'll defer to Trustee Burma first.
Trustee Burma.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of reiterate what Sally was saying about, I think some sort of either set of protocols or something that's unique to us, whether that keeps a lot of the same ones and just posting them, I think would be really beneficial. I think the more efficient we can be, especially at the beginnings, I think the better. But yeah, I think those things are really important. And I think as far as a mission and vision for Silverton, I think that would be far more important and unifying than I think the Pledge of Allegiance would be at the beginning. And that would be my 2 cents on it.
Trustee Barella.
So let's put it a little in context to what Jess was saying. There was a lot of disruption. There was a lot of people doing jobs that they weren't supposed to be doing, micromanaging, and or being staff. When you're a board member, you are not a staff member. We set policy and procedure and give direction to staff. So we had a lot of the staff falling apart, and we had people doing jobs that they should not have been doing. That'd have been like me going and take over John Seid's position. It just should not be done. So a lot of that was created, like Jess was saying, at a retreat, because there was just so much angst, animosity, and no clear vision about what was going on. So what we did forget, though, is when we made when that board made the new set of protocols, you left out the public. I agree that people get the 3 minutes if they've got something, but when we stopped engaging with them during the larger discussions that forms how we're going to vote on either a resolution or an ordinance or things that are coming at us, we really do need to hear the public. And that fell apart. I mean, we used to have decent attendance, and then by I swear the last year and a half, if your name was not on that agenda, nobody shows up. I mean, Gary Davis is our one. Hats off to him for showing up. He shows up more than the newspaper guy does. So if we're going to revisit these and take into context that yes, we want to have that respect. Yes, we need the formality. I like the idea of actually reading the mission statement, and hopefully Mr. Ryder will get you all those that we put together before. And obviously we can collaborate if there needs to be other additional wording and sentences. But I don't want to lose the formality of the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sorry. Maybe it's because of my age. The older you are, the more you were taught to stand up in class, and that is what you did every day, because, I mean, we don't say God anymore, but to me it's God and country. But I'm a Christian. I have no problem saying that. But I want to make sure that we re-engage the public. I don't know if Colorado had something else that we could stand up and say. I'm a Colorado, native, born and raised. So I understand the not wanting to read the protocol. Oh my God, please, can we stop? Can we post it? Can we put it out there? But can we give a little bit more leeway for the public to have input? And yeah, I like the idea of reading our mission statement, and or even, you know, once in a while mixing it up and reading goals that we've established, and you know, what is it that we're trying to do. But this needs to be published somewhere too. We worked long and hard to get to this point, to have this document, because it didn't exist before I got on the board. So, and it's many pages. You know, Trustee Wiegert and Trustee Lashley can attest to how much we went through to get to this collective. So, yeah, I would love to stop reading those at the beginning, and we need to change some wording. Please. Obviously, we can't make decisions now, but I don't know. Does everybody like my idea of shooting the? We're supposed to. Protocol says that we actually give it directly to Mr. Ryder, I believe. we all formulate little things because we have to watch the open meeting laws. It's subjective to our emails as well. So if we all email on one big chain, that is open meeting. So that's why I believe we're supposed to email directly to Mr. Ryder. Mr. Ryder puts it together and then it goes out again. So that way we don't compromise the open meeting laws.
Well, if I may, Trustee Borelli, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. First and foremost, we have such a strong group of leaders on this board. You have an incredibly strong staff. When I got here, the first thing I said, we're transparent. We're open. Town hall is open. My door is open. You don't need to engage on the issues page. You can come right into my office and talk about anything. Ask any question. If I can help you, if we can solve your problem, we'll try to do it. Sometimes we can't, but we're open and we're transparent, and we've never been in a better position to do that. So however the form it takes, you know, for reading something formally or the pledge or whatever, the underlying issue is that we're open, we're leading, and a town is serving its people. That's the bottom line.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you. I think a lot of great things are being said here, and I think that our protocol, reading our protocol, can be replaced with some kind of mission or vision statement. And Molly, I really hope that we don't have to recreate all of what we created before, but hopefully that can give us a good starting point, and we can create something that's unique to this board, and make that kind of our protocols that we read at the beginning of a meeting. I think that would do really well for setting the tone for the meeting, without having to necessarily read the protocols. I do think we should visit how we handle public participation. I'm really happy with the way that we have 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, 3 minutes at the end of the meeting, and then on every ordinance and everything that basically it requires public comment, that we also give another comment period to that. I'm surprised that some people sometimes haven't utilized all of those times to talk about their issues when they come in front of the board. But I think that we can definitely think creatively at ways that we can increase public participation. But I think that's kind of a whole separate discussion. And if we need to revise a little bit of the protocols, I think we can. If we think that they're okay the way that they are, I'm okay with the way that they are too. So yeah, but I definitely agree that opening up with a vision statement or something more on a positive note is a little bit better than reading the rules at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you. So I think we're going to receive a lot of emails over the next couple of days, and we will have a lot to talk about this coming Monday. I believe that Attorney Paul Kosnick will be also asking us to have an executive session before the meeting this coming Monday to get the new trustees up to speed on the Silverton Lakes RV issues and all the related things there. So we definitely have a lot of on our plate coming up. I'd like to thank everybody. We talked about a ton of difficult topics today, and I'm really excited that we were able to do so as productively as we did. And I enjoy hearing that we don't all just agree on everything. It means that we are doing a good job representing the different people in town and the different views in town. If we all just agreed about everything, we probably weren't a good cross section of who lives here. So as long as we can continue having these discussions in such a productive way, that's going to be awesome. So thank you. Trustee Barella.
I know we all say we want to respect each other's time, but sometimes work sessions, although we're not allowed to make decisions in them, it's so much because you get to talk a little bit more free. You really get to present your ideas more. So I just hope everybody, all the new members, really start to feel that, because this really is a great forum. Executive session, you let it all go. You can say everything you've been thinking for, but in a work session, you really, if you listen to each other, you'll find that most of the time we all have a common goal. Even on some of the most mundane things, you're like, oh, never would have thought of that, but yeah, that's good. So work sessions, I felt that we'd never quite had enough of them, and they were always put an hour before our other meetings. Even if we can do this in person, when this is all over, I don't actually see that this is a bad idea, where you could actually like be cooking your dinner if you had to and still be at a meeting. For work sessions, I think this has been an amazing platform, although very underutilized previous to this. Unfortunately, we're doing it this way, but I'm truly impressed. This was, I mean, it was long, but my God, guys, this was really impressive.
Well, I couldn't agree more. You guys are strong. Ideas are flowing. You're not afraid to agree to disagree. That's the way stuff gets done. Thank you all, really.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't have anything else on the agenda for tonight. We did leave a handful of things open, but I think that's a good thing. And I look forward to continuing those discussions. If anyone would like to close with anything else before we all sign off.
I'm just curious, was there an agenda for tonight sent out? Because I never received one.
It wasn't much of one, Trustee Wiegert. It just said work session to discuss committees, and we went a little bit beyond that. Let me check your email. We sent it to your regular one, but we'll double check to make sure you get it next time.
Yeah, I suppose one last thing before we go, can we just have a quick roll call on whose emails seem to be working sufficiently? Did all of the new trustees have the ability to get into their town email?
Yeah, so you've all been issued your name, first initial, last name, .silverton or @silverton.co.us. That's the one we're sending it to, although like in the case of Trustee Wiegert, we're probably still sending it to whatever your old one was. I'm yelling at
It's
Kelly.
the jwiegert@silverton.co.us is what Kelly sent the agenda on Thursday to.
Okay.
So do you have issues with that email, or is that okay?
That is still not working for me.
Okay.
I've contacted the server. They said it's something with my computer. For whatever reason, I'm not getting anything from Kelly. So if we could just continue to use my Gmail address until I get that figured out, that'd be best for me.
Okay, Jess, I'll go back to your Gmail one for you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
And Jess, if you want to spend a couple minutes today, I had a similar issue, and the way that I believe a few of us now are accessing our emails is through a web browser as opposed to like Outlook on your computer, and I can help you get that set up. Trustee Barella?
I just want to make sure that you are still using mine. I had set it up like the day the vote count came through when I was elected. Before that, the town was issuing them. So I've never changed, and I have everything, every single communication already on that. So please continue to use that Yahoo account. Just because that's, yeah, in case it ever got called for open meetings or anything to court, I've got everything in one place.
Yeah, so the important thing here, especially for new trustees and new mayor, is that we want to make sure we're separating church and state here and keeping anything personal is personal, town is town. So however you want to do that, we'll do it, but just keep that in mind.
Wonderful.
So, okay, Kelly, you and I'm yelling at her and talking to her on the screen, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Whatever email you want us to use for town business, we will use. Just keeping in mind that we want that to be separate from your personal.
I think Austin had his hand up. Sorry, Michael's just coming in.
Hi.
I was just going to say that as I've been using the Silverton email for a couple of years here, but we're all probably fairly used to the format of email that we're used to. So I'm going to probably work up on mine a way to forward email to a Gmail account that I'm a little bit more familiar with. So if anybody else is interested in having the same thing kind of done with their Silverton account, I can probably help you with that.
I asked Sakiro about that, and they did not like that idea because of what Trustee Barella is saying with openness to emails.
So we have they're working pretty hard to fix the underlying issue. We're going to have a loaner server at the town by the end of this week, if not early next week. And that should resolve the issues that those of us with Macs or newer versions of Microsoft Office are having. So within 2 weeks, at least the email issue should be gone. And for those of us that have relatively new emails, that should happen almost instantaneously once the new server gets on. For people who have history and lots of stuff in their emails, it could take a few days.
And thank you, Shane, for bringing your technical expertise to bear. That's something we may not have had before. Appreciate your efforts in that regard for sure. Thank you.
I'm not sure how effective I'll be, but I'll do my best. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, shall we call it?
Hey, good, because my son's trying to turn on the TV.
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. And I look forward to seeing you all on Monday.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you. So it's 7:54 and we'll end this meeting. Good night all.
Night.